You will hear a number of different recordings and you'll have to answer questions on what you hear. There'll be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you'll have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you'll be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You'll hear a woman complaining about an item she has bought. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Smart Electricals, Mike speaking. How may I help you today?
Good morning. I'm calling to complain about an item I recently purchased from your company. I'm not happy with it.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'll take you through the company's complaints procedure. I'll need to retrieve your files from our records so that we can discuss the problem properly and find a solution. I'll need to take some details from you first. Is that okay?
Okay, but I don't have a lot of time. Will it take long?
Not long, madam. Can I first take your name?
Yes, it's Susan Yorke. Y-O-R-K-E.
Okay. Can I have the address, please?
Yes, it's Flat 1, 25 Alpine Avenue. That's A-L-P-I-N-E Avenue, Harchester. The postcode is HA6 5LD.
Okay. Next. Could you give me your telephone number? Preferably one that we can call you on during normal working hours.
Well, the home one is 01734 525 268. But you're only likely to catch me on that number in the evenings. I usually have my mobile phone with me during the day, though.
It's probably best to take that number then.
All right. My mobile number is 0781 233 452.
And do you have the order reference number on you, by any chance?
Well, I have the receipt that the camera came with in front of me.
Ah, good.
Which number is it? It's a bit confusing.
It should be the 7-digit number on the top left corner of your invoice.
Let me have a look. I need my glasses. Found it. It's DMX8443.
Thanks. Now, when did you purchase the item?
Well, the camera was delivered last Monday, on the 1st of February. I ordered it online about 2 weeks before that, but I can't remember the exact date.
If you have another look on the invoice receipt, the date should be there.
Oh, yes. Here it is. January the 15th.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. So, the item is a digital camera?
Yes, it's the Aqua PowerShot model in silver.
Thank you. Did you take out any kind of insurance when you bought it?
Well, no, it was on special offer. I didn't need to pay any extra for the insurance because it came with a special 4-star policy.
Well, it means you're fully covered for at least another 3 years.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Right. What is the problem?
Yes, the first thing is that it came with one memory card in the box when there were supposed to be two.
Oh dear. I'm terribly sorry about that. It must have been an oversight in the packing department. I can do something about that straight away and get one sent out to you.
Well, that's not the only thing. I bought it as a present for my niece because she loves swimming. It said on the website that it was waterproof, but when she took it on holiday and tried to use it underwater, it got ruined because water got into the lens. You can imagine how disappointed my niece was.
I certainly can. Were those the only problems?
No, there was one other thing. It came with a case to protect it. When I opened the box to take the case out, I saw that it had a big scratch on it.
We're really sorry about that. I can offer to have the camera repaired for you. In the event that it can't be repaired, we'll send you a replacement.
I don't think so. Seeing as it was faulty in the first place, I wouldn't want another one. I think I'd rather have my money back. Can I get a refund?
Yes, of course. If you send it back to customer services, I'll make sure it's dealt with.
Thank you very much. That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You'll hear a tour guide talking to a group of visitors about Bestley Castle. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to Bestley Castle. It's nice to see so many of you here today. Before we go in, I'd like to tell you some information about the castle, the things to see and do, and the facilities available to you in the grounds. We'll do our best to make this a truly memorable visit. Now, the castle grounds are quite big, and we don't want you to get lost, so I'm going to give you an idea of the layout. At the moment, we are at the entrance, and immediately to our left is the Tourist Information Office. Go here if you need any questions answered. They'll be happy to help. And of course, behind the tourist office is the car park where the coach dropped you off. And it'll also pick you up from the same spot at 5 p.m. today. In front of us are the water gardens. If you stroll through, you get to the North Bridge, which is the entrance to Bestley Castle. Take your time and enjoy looking around the castle. There's a lot of history steeped in those walls. As you leave the castle via the South Bridge, you'll be greeted with the sight of roaming deer. During the day, there will be scheduled feeding opportunities where visitors can get involved. However, we do request that you do not feed the deer outside these times. To the right of the deer park is the Castle Museum, and behind that is our award-winning restaurant. It's a relatively new addition to the castle grounds, but is fast gaining a reputation for its food. Alternatively, you can choose to dine in the picnic area on the other side of the deer park. It's perfect for the family as it's next to the kids' play area and homemade ice cream hut. We hope that on your way out, you'll pop into the gift shop by the exit for something to remember us by.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Admission to the grounds is free for all. That includes the museum, gardens, and picnic area. There is an admission fee for the castle, which is £6.50 for adults, with a 10% discount for students and retired people. Children under the age of 16 pay half adult price, and under 8 go in free. There are many spectacular events throughout the year, and for most of them, there's also an admission fee. As these events are in high demand, it's a good idea to book well in advance. Some of the exciting events planned for this year are the Summer Medieval Festival, where you can watch old-fashioned nights and experience a feast in the halls of the castle, as if you were a guest of King Henry VIII himself. There are several concerts planned this year too, including a rock concert at an admission price of £10 per person and a special jazz concert which is free to the public. I'm sure you'll agree that all tastes and ages will be satisfied. One scary but extremely popular event is the annual Haunted Castle event at the end of October, where the castle comes alive at night. Why don't you come along if you're brave enough? Another sight to see is the fantastic firework display on November 5th, and the cost of that includes refreshments. We also have a long tradition of raising money for charity. The charity event held every year on the first day of May will this year be an archery contest. Entrance is free, but donations are certainly welcome. This year, we'll be collecting money on behalf of a charity for elderly people, Age Concern. Just in case you can't remember all of that, you can pick up a leaflet showing the timetable and prices for all events from the Tourist Information Desk. You can also go online to get this information from our website.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You'll hear a tutor and some students discussing eating disorders. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Good afternoon. I hope everything is going well. Right, we've been looking at problems some people have with eating. And today I'd like to focus on one you've probably come across in your reading. It is sometimes called binge eating disorder, or BED. As you know, I am not a particular fan of these acronyms, so I will refer to it by the alternative name, compulsive eating disorder. Has anybody heard of it?
Yes, I have. In fact, I read a case study of a first-year university student who was diagnosed with it.
Do you remember what the symptoms are?
Well, of course, one symptom is that the person eats too much, although that's true for other eating disorders as well. they also put on weight.
That's right. Whereas in some other conditions, such as bulimia, they don't, and can actually lose weight. One thing that compulsive eating disorder and bulimia have in common, though, is that the person with the condition often becomes clinically depressed.
Are you saying that everybody who is overweight is suffering from the disorder?
Not at all. What makes the compulsive eater different is the pattern of the disorder. Initially, as we've said, the compulsive eater starts eating too much. This seems to be because the sufferer finds comfort in food and eating is seen as a way of coping with problems. They don't eat because they feel hungry. Mary, in the case study you read, was there any reference to what triggered the problem?
I seem to recall that the student was suffering from stress because she was revising for exams, and she started eating snacks, junk food, while she was studying. Soon, she was eating snacks all the time, and it just got worse from there.
Yes, that sounds plausible, although compulsive eating often starts a lot earlier than the case you describe.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 24 to 30.
Anyway, once the condition has been triggered, often by constant snacking as you mentioned, it becomes progressively worse. Over a period of time, the sufferer loses control of their food intake. They become preoccupied with food, and the binge eating increases. Overeating blocks out negative emotions such as loneliness, worries about work, depression, and so on. But it is only a temporary effect. Apart from the physical discomfort that overeating often causes, the sufferer begins to feel embarrassed by their behavior. They then take drastic action to try to compensate. In an attempt to lose weight, compulsive eaters will try extreme diets, skipping meals, or going without any food at all for a day or more.
Not a healthy way to try to lose weight, obviously.
Absolutely. And of course, the person has to start eating again at some point.
In other words, it becomes a vicious circle?
That's right. Binge eating, extreme dieting, or attempts to lose weight by other means, and then binge eating again.
What are the long-term effects of compulsive eating?
As you might expect, these are similar to those for people suffering from obesity. Diabetes is frequently reported.
What about treatment?
The disorder can be treated, certainly. But there's always the possibility that the patient will suffer a relapse and start binging again.
What does treatment involve? Medication?
No. It normally involves sessions with a therapist experienced in treating eating disorders. A nutritionist will often be involved as well.
Are there any self-help organizations? I mean, organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yes, there are. And you might want to follow this one up for your research. One organization is called Overeaters Anonymous, and they have what they describe as a 12-step program to help people overcome the disorder. You can find out more from the organization's website. Right. I think that'll have given you plenty to follow up. So I'll see you at the same time next week.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You'll hear a man giving a lecture on nuclear fusion. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 33. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 33.
I'd like to start by thanking so many of you for attending this, my first public lecture at this magnificent university. I'm going to be talking to you today about nuclear fusion. Before I proceed further, I would like to apologize on behalf of some of our newspapers for the sensationalist and hopelessly inaccurate articles that have been published on the subject over the years. I must confess that my own interest in the subject was actually stimulated by an article published more than 50 years ago in a popular Sunday tabloid with the impressive title, Power from the Sea. Today, most people would probably interpret such a title as an introduction to a discussion on the latest developments in renewable energy sources, such as wave technology or generating electricity from tidal flows. But back then, little, if any, progress had been made in these fields since the invention of the water wheel. As I recall, following coverage of the opening of the world's first commercial nuclear power station, more than 50 years ago now, at Calder Hall in 1956, the article promised that we would have limitless, almost free electricity within 10 years. It claimed that we could do this using an isotope of water, deuterium, from the sea. This would be used in reactors to combine simple molecules of hydrogen to form helium, releasing energy in the process. Of course, this is different from the process of nuclear fission, which today's nuclear reactors use. I wouldn't like to say that the article I read as a boy was totally inaccurate. It's true that the concept of producing energy from nuclear fusion, essentially reproducing the reactions by which our sun and other stars produce energy, depends on fusing atoms of hydrogen, but the timescale suggested was hopelessly wrong. To this day, despite some very embarrassing false claims from scientists who should have known better, we have not been able to produce energy from nuclear fusion in a controllable way. Let me make clear what I mean by this statement, before some journalist in the audience gets hold of the wrong end of the stick. Yes, we have been able to fuse hydrogen atoms to produce helium and a release of energy, but the balance account has always been negative. We've always had to put more energy into the reaction than we've ever succeeded in getting out. We know the theory works, but we still do not know if we can get fusion to work for us and solve the problem of our energy needs.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 34 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 34 to 40.
Here, I will briefly explain these problems before going on to give you a summary of the innovative ways being tested to overcome them. First of all, we have to try to understand the incredible physical conditions that exist inside a natural nuclear fusion reactor, such as the Sun. To start with, we have to create temperatures never experienced on our planet. Indeed, if we had experienced the temperatures required, then our planet would never have formed. We have to generate temperatures of at least 100 million degrees Celsius in a carefully controlled environment before we can even hope to produce a fusion reaction. The problems are immense, but it can be done. Many of you will know that you can put your hand into a very hot oven and not get burnt, provided you do not touch any of the surfaces. I won't go into the reasons for this phenomenon here, but we are applying roughly the same principles in designs for fusion reactors. I think I can promise you that the heat will be confined to a very small area. The other major problem we have to find a solution to is pressure. The pressures in a massive body like the Sun are vast, and this is what brings the hydrogen atoms into such close proximity to one another that they fuse into helium. We may not have to achieve the same pressures in a fusion reactor, but even so, it is a huge technological problem. What, then, makes me hopeful about the future of energy from nuclear fusion? Perhaps surprisingly, it is developments in laser technology. We can now use lasers to control the nuclear fuel pellets so that they remain suspended inside the reactor without touching the sides. Remember that these pellets are quite small, and because they contain atoms of deuterium and tritium, the two isotopic forms of hydrogen that can be used in these reactions, they are quite light. The lasers will also compress the fuel pellet to raise the pressure to that required to initiate the fusion reaction. Another, far more powerful laser will be used to heat the fuel pellet to the temperature required. This laser, if you like, will act as the trigger to start the reaction. Once started, it is hoped that the reaction will produce enough energy to maintain itself, and also that it will produce a surplus in the form of heat that can be used to produce the steam needed to drive turbines in order to generate the electricity the world needs. To give you some idea of how much energy we can produce, it has been calculated that just 1 kilogram of fusion fuel is capable of producing the same amount of energy as 10,000 tons of fossil fuel. I think you would agree that such an objective is worth working towards. I believe, and I am not alone in this, that nuclear fusion could supply the world's energy needs for centuries to come.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.